Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar. We are back for another match week review of the Bundesliga, tuning in as ever. So welcome along, and I hope you enjoy what we have in store for you. We were, of course, as advertised on our socials, hoping to welcome Adam Khan onto the show tonight as a special guest, but unfortunately, Adam's had to drop out due to a few unforeseen circumstances. So we look forward to welcoming Adam on a future show. So tonight, you're stuck with myself and Mark. Speaking of, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, just freezing, basically. I think I was just saying to you, Rory, that it's absolutely freezing over here in the Bundesrepublik. Literally snow coming out of the window as I'm looking out now. And it's just, really, really cold, like below zero, I think, at the moment. And it's going to go, yes, I'm meant to be at the Nuremberg game as well on Saturday. So it's going to be an absolute freezing one, that, I think.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Freezing atmosphere for yourself there, Mark. Before we get cracking, then obviously we've got the featured four for you all as per, and we'll go through the rest of the games in what detail we can do. I've had such a busy weekend. I've only been able to kind of get myself caught up a little bit more today, and as has Mark really, but we'll be going through it in as much detail as we can do. And before we get started, of course, please do smash a like, a thumbs up on this video tonight. Comment along if you've got any questions or comments about the weekend, like who was your star of the weekend, and then, of course, press the red button to subscribe. We'll get into it in a moment. Obviously, always a shout out to our great partners, as per usual, Bundesliga Boxes and indeed Bully News. We'll get cracking. We won't reflect too much on Friday night's watch along, I don't think, because we had good fun with it. It was a good match. Really appreciate everyone who tuned in and watched that with us. But naturally, it being a 1-0 scoreline, it's not going to make the featured forum. There's no need for us to cover that one too much. Of course, Bayern putting the pressure back on Leverkusen ahead of the Saturday matches. And speaking of the title race, where better place to start with Leverkusen's trip to Werder Bremen, Mark. And an interesting game this, but obviously it went to the form book, and Leverkusen were able to react to Bayern's win on Friday. Goals from Frimpong and Grimaldo, helped out by a rather, unfortunate own goal by De Man. It's getting to this point, Mark, where it's not a surprise that, it hasn't been a surprise for a long time that Frimpong and Grimaldo are the goal scorers for Leverkusen. But I'm not sure fullbacks are supposed to score this much. Like it makes me question. I question my footballing ability most of the time when I play. But as a fullback, they're giving me a bad name because they score every week, and the quality that they're providing is just absolutely sensational. And when you've got players like that, you're always going to be set if the likes of Boniface or Hoffman or anyone else aren't getting the goals. You've got these two as well. I mean, another great performance for them and a professional one of that.
Yeah, ironically, it was actually three fullbacks that scored for Leverkusen as well, because also De Man as well is also a fullback, and that was an absolute horror moment for him. By the way, that was an absolutely disgraceful own goal. Really, I think if it had been Grimaldo or maybe Frimpong, then it would have been an amazing finish actually. But considering it was into his own back of his own onion bag, it was a bit of a poor one, that in truth, and it didn't get Werder Bremen off to the best start. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, they're just ridiculous, aren't they, Leverkusen? I just thought it was such a professional performance, this. I'd actually said it was going to be a hard game because Bremen had been pretty solid at home. They'd only lost twice at home in 6 games before this one, but they were well beaten, to be honest. Just they barely got a kind of foothold into the match. I just thought, it was once again the fullbacks who did it for the away side again, and an amazing finish from Frimpong. That was superb. From the cutback, just easily sliding past, obviously, Werder Bremen's standing goalkeeper, Petre, as well, who hasn't overly impressed me in his 2 games, in truth. I'm not sure whether Yuri Pavlenka will be super impressed by the fact that he's been benched for him at the moment. But yeah, it was all about Leverkusen, wasn't it, the day? I mean, Boniface, it seems a while since he scored, actually, but he's still playing really well up top. You know, the way he chases down lost causes and recycles the ball so well. You know, Granit Xhaka was superb again with that in that midfield partnership with Palacios. But yeah, the last few weeks it's been Grimaldo. It's been the Grimaldo show. You know, I put him into my fantasy team for the first time this season, actually, and he didn't point one bit. He ended up bringing home like 30 points or so. So can't complain about that at all. His finishing ability is just ridiculous. It really is for a fullback. You know, it's that amazing, sweet, curled strike. This one was a little bit different to the ones that he scored more recently because he kind of cut in from the flank, didn't he? And just, you know, slid it comfortably past Zetterer into the top corner. But it was still another fantastic finish. And that's 7 league goals from a fullback in 12 games. Let that sink in, guys, you know. And I think he's got like 3-4 assists on top of that as well. He's averaging like from fullback a goal contribution a game, which is just, it's not fair, really, when you've got a guy like that in the team. And Frimpong can't be far behind as well because he's, you know, he's always been a goal scorer from that position, but he was superb as well. Yeah, I'm just running out of quality things to say about them, to be honest. There were actually a few changes in the back line from Leverkusen in this game. There was no Jonathan Tah, and Hincapie replaced him. And also Tapsoba, who has picked up a bit of a knock. He was replaced by Andrik, actually, who obviously usually plays defensive midfield, but he slotted in pretty nicely of centre half. And everything that Jabi tries at the minute is working. And it's just been an outstanding season for them. Obviously, they've got Borussia Dortmund at home next week. You know, at the moment, you wouldn't really say they're going to fear them that much, to be honest. But we all know that Dortmund do have a big performance in them, as we've seen against Newcastle twice this season. So, you know, it's going to be a hard fixture. But as things stand, it's just business as usual for the Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah, business as usual, like you say. They don't have anything necessary to fear, but they do have a slightly trickier schedule coming up, don't they? Because they've got Dortmund soon. Then they face my boy Stuttgart, and then I think they've got another couple tricky games after that. So yeah, this will be a testing period for them, and they will test their title credentials. But every challenge that they've been faced with so far, they've passed incredibly well. The goal scoring ability of the side, as you say, when you've got fullbacks who can score as many as they can at the moment, 7 for Grimaldo and 4 or 5, I think, for Frimpong, alongside their assists, you're always going to be safe. I think Leverkusen have now made Bundesliga history by scoring at least 2 goals in their last 12 league games. I don't think anyone's ever done that before, so that's an interesting stat, especially for the Bundesliga. I would have thought that teams have done that before, but again, Xabi's men are scoring goals, and more importantly as well for them, keeping clean sheets and keeping that safe at the other end, like you said, Mark, with those changes that have come in. Hincapie, I think I mentioned it maybe a month ago, really surprised how low down the pecking order he is when they've got Josip Stanisic as well, to be able to call upon either as in a back three or at fullback. So, really, really impressive. From Leverkusen, from Werder's point of view, Mark, obviously, a home game against high-flying Leverkusen isn't going to define their season, really, is it? I mean, again, if Dusk's goal stands to make it 2-1, do we maybe have a different game? I don't know. But either way around, I think it's just for Bremen to dust themselves down. They've got bigger games to come. And where do you think it leaves them in general, Mark? Obviously they're standing 12th place, but naturally they're only, 3 points away from the 16th place relegation playoff spot, which is currently being held by Mainz. So there's only one result away. They'll know that there are bigger fights to come.
Yeah, I don't think they've been woefully bad, Bremen, but it has been a step off from times last season. In general, 2023 hasn't been a good year, actually, for the SVW. SVW, yeah, they've lost a lot of games this year. They obviously didn't have the best Rückrunde last year. They lost a few key players, and now all of a sudden, it's not looking that bright for them, but they'll stay up for me. I've seen enough of them to stay up, but I think they've got a question like which direction do they want to go in, really? Do they want to stay like a mid-table, kind of lower mid-table Bundesliga team, or do they want to start challenging for the top 6, 7 again? And to be honest, for a club of their size with a good history in Europe, they should be challenging for the top 6, 7 for me. And to do that, I'm not sure whether Werner is the man, really, to be honest. I think he's a little bit limited tactically at times. I do like him, and the fans like him, but I don't think he's like a top manager, And I think they'll definitely stick with him for this season, but I think going further forward, maybe looking at the summer kind of time, will they give him a third year? I'm not so sure, because I think he's a decent manager for a lower Bundesliga team, but is he going to be the kind of guy that's got the tactical nous to get them back up to that top 6, 7? Probably not for me. And I think their form has been a little bit iffy for a while now, but I'm not trying to tempt anyone to say he's going to get sacked or fired or anything, but things aren't that bright at Bremen at the minute. I do believe they'll stay up, but it could be a 12th, 13th finish this year, which might, in the second season, might not be the most pleasing result for the team.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll have to watch that with great interest, how Bremen get on. But I think, like you say, no great panic at this stage. Long way to go in the season. Obviously, based off the start as well, I think, they'll probably take it as things stand, especially with the transfer window that they had pending injuries as well. So anyway, we shall move on to third placed match from the weekend. And it was one that everyone was really excited to watch on Saturday evening. I was out and about in Sheffield trying to keep tabs on this game because naturally in Sheffield city centre, Frankfurt versus Stuttgart wasn't primetime TV, regrettably. So I was having to track it on my phone as much as possible and catch up on it thereafter. But obviously, upon getting a phone notification 1 minute into the match, seeing that Undav had scored, my mood was particularly lifted by this. And then the rest of the game, obviously, ensuing, Mark. I'll throw this one over to you straight away. Obviously, Undav got the start. Guirassy wasn't benched; he was rested, or they're bringing him back slowly. But I think this is the first time first time for a while, generally speaking, this season, where I looked at the Stuttgart bench as like, that's a game-changing bench that they have there in terms of the players that they have available. Obviously, some bad news in regards to Ito, who's now been ruled out for the rest of the season. And that was recorded by Stuttgart today on Twitter. So that's obviously bad news. But for the second goal, if we can rely on Maxi Mittelstädt to be able to whip in those lovely crosses like Bjorn Sousa onto Undav's head, then maybe we're okay at left back, but it still makes me feel a little bit concerned in that sense. So what did you make of the match? Stuttgart got out of the blocks quickly, and obviously the Frankfurt goal's an absolute freak of an own goal as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Stuttgart were well worthy of the 3 points. I've got no doubts about that. I think, as you say, the start was brilliant, and it was a really, really nice goal as well. Like the pass through from Mio, that was a really nice finish as well from Undav. And to be honest, when I was watching this game, I kind of thought that obviously it's a huge leap of faith shown as well by obviously Hoeneß to start Undav ahead of Guirassy as well. Because I think everyone thought Guirassy was back now after that brilliant cameo against Dortmund. I think he also played on international duty as well. Yeah. And everyone thought it was an absolute shoo-in that that the big man was going to start this game. But the fact that Undav started, I think, shows that Hoeneß has a lot of faith in him as well. And he's starting to look really confident as well. I think when he first went to the team, he looked a bit nervous, like naturally, because he's been replacing probably the best striker in the league, apart from maybe Harry Kane. And, I think the last couple of games he's looked brilliant. He was really good against Dortmund. And today in this game, he was absolutely superb, really. Both goals were really well finished. The header as well, which was initially given as offside, but obviously it was nowhere near offside. That was a clear onside goal. I think one of the most impressive things about Stuttgart here is the way they responded to that free cone goal, as you say, because that was really unlucky. sometimes that goes against you, and you can let your heads drop and you feel like hard done to. And I think for probably 10 minutes after the equaliser, they did a little bit, to be honest. They didn't play very well between probably 25 and 35 minutes, and Frankfurt had a few chances, but in general, the performance was superb, and the 2 goals were really well worked. Special mentions to Mittelstädt, as you said. They picked him up, for a free or for like $500,000 from Hertha Berlin. It wasn't very much anyway.
It wasn't a lot, no.
Most people thought, that's not really a very inspiring signing, but he's been superb since he came in as well. And there's so many players you can talk about. Furyk and Mio were fantastic again. They were both injury doubts coming into this one, I think, but both played well. Even Guirassy was able to come on at the end as well, and he almost scored a goal as well, which would have made it 3-1.
Yeah.
It's just so many positive things to look at. As you say, Ito is a massive loss because he is amazing as a player. But even then, you've got the likes of Stenzel, who was good when he started, Rouault, who had good moments as well. And also, another big thing is the fact that Wagnerman is starting to come back as well. It will be interesting to see whether he goes back in the squad as well and where he plays, because at the moment, I think when he played last season, he was mostly being played in a more advanced position than his initial right back. So, and I can't see either Furyk or Mio being dropped at the moment. So maybe he'll come in for Leveling. That's highly possible that Leveling, because he's been playing kind of right fullback in recent weeks. It's highly possible he'll come in for him, and I think that might even strengthen the team even further. But even without Ito, I think there's enough quality in that squad for me, this was the result, I'll be honest, that made me think, Stuttgart Champions League contenders, well and truly.
Well, you've heard it here first. Makes me goosebumps even hearing that word. But yeah, no, really exciting times. I think that, like you say, this result really reaffirmed, I think, people's belief in what Stuttgart are actually going to do this season. I really hope I'm not, jinxing things by saying this, but they seriously look like they mean business. And, having Undav, who's come in to be able to be on 7 Bundesliga goals already so far this season, 8 in all competitions, got the winner against Union in the Pokal, picks up really good positions as well, really smart movement, really hard to pick up. And, his finishes were clinical, and that's exactly what you want. It's given Hoeneß the ability to rest Guirassy, whereas last season it would be he has to start. We need the points. He has to start. There's, we have to risk him. There's none of that now. He can gradually build Guirassy up again and push him when we need to, and that's absolutely brilliant. Whatever happens in January, we'll have to see. But for Stuttgart fans alike, they just have to enjoy the ride right now and just keep on it effectively, and long may that continue. And so, from a Frankfurt point of view as well, their long unbeaten home records comes to an end. Their run of, really good form as well. Hence why we penned this to be a tight contest. I suppose they'll be disappointed from getting that slice of luck with the Anton own goal that they didn't. Well, they did probably play better pending that, own goal and taking a bit of momentum from it, but they weren't able to get Marmoush into the game as much. And, some of their bigger players, Chaibi did have a couple of efforts. Larson had an effort in the second half as well. But Stuttgart did keep them at bay quite well. So just a bit of a blip for Frankfurt, do we think, Mark? And they'll hopefully, they won't take too much of a confidence bashing from a 2-1 home defeat, will they?
No, I just think the Stuttgart system worked better, in my opinion. I think it was much more fluid. The 2 holding midfielders, Stiller and Karatso, they kind of overran Shaqiri and Larson a little bit, I felt, at times. Apart from that period in the second half, as I say, for 10, 15 minutes, when Frankfurt did look in the ascendancy and they had a couple of chances. As you say, the front 3 just didn't really get into the game much at all, really. Mbibe, Knauf and Marmoush, you didn't see much of them at all in the match. And for me, I was a bit disappointed with Frankfurt, in truth. I really do believe that Stuttgart were well worthy of the points in this game, really. I think Max was pretty good at fullback, even though he ended up going off at one stage. I quite like him. I just think they lost to a better team. I just think the Stuttgart team is Champions League worthy, at least at the moment. That could change potentially if, Guirassy does leave in January, if some of these overperforming players are leaving in January. The wheels could fall off, but I don't see them falling off before Christmas, put it that way. I think this team will get through the next 4 games with at least 2 or 3 more wins, and they'll be in a very good position by Christmas. And as for Frankfurt, I still see them probably top 6, top 7 challenges, but they're not quite impressive enough to get above probably 6th. I would say 6th is their ceiling this season, really.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that, to be honest. So, yeah, work for Frankfurt to do, but they have been on a good run, so that must be acknowledged, absolutely. Stuttgart have now won more games than they managed the entirety of last season. So very well done to them. So we've reached halfway of our countdown, and we'll move on to the second placed match from this weekend. Obviously, if you're watching on X currently, pop over and say hello. We welcome everyone watching on YouTube. And if you can give us a thumbs up whilst you're at it, even better. But yes, the second game on our countdown is a game where I kind of felt particularly either head coach who lost this game was always going to be under a significant amount of, pressure or get a lot more stick, because both teams have been faltering after, RB certainly had a good start to the season, but they've been dropping off now, and they fell victim to losing on the road once more, as Wolfsburg have done them 2-1 at the weekend. Goals from Jonas Wind, another impressive outing from him. Roggiero, who absolutely belted his goal in after Poulsen had equalised for RB. There was certainly no shortage of opportunities for Leipzig, Mark, and in this game. So what's going on with Leipzig? Because when we see them at full whack, and they've got some really exciting young players as well, they're obviously up there with the best in the Bundesliga, and they're doing a fine job at the moment in the Champions League group, and look set to qualify with alongside Man City, it would seem. But I mean, are they just the great pretenders? I expect Leipzig to be up there with Leverkusen and Bayern this season. Am I flattering myself or deceiving myself? Or, I mean, what have you thought of RB in recent weeks?
Yeah, it's not been good enough, in truth. Results-wise, this is the second defeat to Wolfsburg in just a few weeks. And to be honest, I think it's the only games Wolfsburg have won in months, in truth. Ironically. I mean, as it happened, they were very lucky to win this game. Actually, as you say, I think RB were the better team. They played the better football through the midfield. But that's the first of their problems. They're just not finishing chances at the minute. I think it's kind of difficult to analyse where Pender's at, because on one side he's got, I think, 8 goals, but at the same time he also misses a lot of chances too. So yeah, I think statistically, if you looked at his performances, you'd say, yeah, it's really good. 8 goals in 12 games and a few in the Champions League, but he's the kind of only real goal scorer in that team. That's another of the problems. I think they've lost the likes of Szoboszlai. They lost a lot of Nkunku, of course. They had so many goal scorers last season. And this year, I'm only really seeing Openda get the goals, and he's not super clinical either. That's the problem. I think, I'll be honest, I don't understand really their over-reliance on Poulsen. I do like Poulsen, but he's not a guy that should be starting every game for this RB Leipzig side for me. I think he scored in this game, but I don't quite understand that one. I think Sesko has been underused, to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Carvalho has been underused as well, coming in with a big reputation from Liverpool as one of their young prospects. He's barely played this season. I think, obviously, Javi Simmons has been superb. He's been the absolute bright spot, the best player for them by a long distance this season. I think Schlager has also been good, coming back into form, but I don't think he knows his best 11. I really don't. Baumgartner's been in and out of the team. Forsberg's been in and out of the team. It's too much chopping, changing. I don't like it when teams do really a lot of rotation like that. I think every manager needs to know his best 11, and then you can rotate based on like fitness, tactical, and things like that. But I just don't believe he knows his best 11. You know, we saw Kevin Campbell was dropped for this game for Haidara. You know, I think the midfield worked relatively well, but something's just not clicking at the minute for them. And I think it could be the fact that Poulsen's getting too much game time. I know he scored in the game, but I just think he's been overused. I mean, you've got to get Šeško on the pitch more than what they're doing at the minute. That's one thing. I also think they've got to give Carvalho more of a go because, you know, from what I've seen of him, he looks really impressive. I think he played for Fulham before he went to Liverpool, and he looked like a world beater for them, you know, and I don't understand why he's not getting used. I understand a bit of rotation on those wing positions, but some players are getting underused in that team badly. And obviously in this particular game, Blasvik, who, by the way, for me is one of the best keepers in the Bundesliga. He doesn't make many errors, but he dropped a clanger for that Jonas Wind opening goal. He really did. That was a horrible error. What should have been a simple catch ended up being dropped into his own net, and that didn't get them off to a good start. But yeah, things aren't looking that rosy at the minute for Leipzig. You know, it's really isn't. They're out of the cup. You know, they're pretty much out of the title race, if we're being honest, really. And it looks like they're just going for top 4 and then try and get as far as they can in the Champions League. But it's hard to see them getting past the last 16 as things stand. I think they should stick with Rosa. I do like Rosa in general, but yeah, I just think it was a poor transfer window in general. They lost too many players. I think they just sold too many of those stars, and they got some good replacements, but not that many of them have really done that well so far. Probably Simmons and to an extent Openda aside. Would you agree with that, Rory, or am I being a bit harsh there?
I was on the fence about whether Leipzig's window was really good or really average, mainly because of the fact that obviously their big one was Openda in terms of money spent, and he has produced the goods because he has scored goals. But like you say, he is still very, you know, raw, and he does miss chances. But I think him being signed is a really big plus. Bringing in Xavi Simons has been an excellent piece of business in terms of obviously what he's producing on the pitch. But let's be honest, as an asset, surely he'll be gone back to PSG in the summer. So from a loan point of view, great to have him for a season, but it depends whether that loan is good enough to get you another couple of trophies or to push you to the next level. If it's just to replace, you know, the likes of Nkunku and Szoboszlai, who are now pastures new, and just keep you at a stable level, and then it's, you know, I don't see it as that more of a positive. It's more positive for Xavi Simons because he gets to just get loads more first team football. He experiences a new league and his value just shoots up again. You know, PSG will be licking their lips because they know they've got a hell of a player on their hands. And there's no way that Leipzig have the money power to take him off of PSG. Not in my opinion, anyway. So yeah, it is a weird one, but they have invested in some younger players as well. So that might come to the fore. We shall see. But yeah, so far it has been underwhelming of late, definitely for RB Leipzig. They definitely need to pull their socks up. Much needed window for Wolfsburg, Mark. I think particularly if we saw them lose this one, there would have been well, there's probably always pressure on Kovac, but what did you think about them? You know, it's timely from a win point of view, but as we've already alluded to, Leipzig probably could have easily scored a lot more goals if they were more clinical, and we would have been talking about a Wolfsburg team who are under great amount of pressure also.
Yeah, I think it's a case of papering over the cracks a little bit. That's my honest opinion. I think, as I say, the first goal was a free goal. I mean, it was a big error from Blasvik. The second goal was actually a really good goal from Wolfsburg. I mean, it was a well-worked. But actually, at the time, ironically, Leipzig were absolutely battering them as well. Like, they were like really pressing down for that second goal. And then just out of the blue, they managed to pull that out. And that's what Wolfsburg can do. You know, I think Wolfsburg and Leipzig, they have very, very similar strategies in many ways, in my opinion. They have a big turnover in the squad. Like every year, they sell a lot of good players, but then they bring in a lot of big players as well, like every single year. And it's all too much sporadic for me. It's just like on the day they can be really good, and even in patches in matches they look like world beaters, but there's not enough real kind of long-term goal setting there and stuff, So you struck because they have so many kind of players turning over. Like you can never really set a goal for the players, because sometimes with both of these clubs, it gets the feeling that they're just like feeder clubs for like bigger European teams at times. And I think until they get out that mindset, they won't get any further than what they're doing. That's my opinion, because Leipzig, for me, they're in the last 5-6 years, they've had some of the best players in Europe on their books. Literally, they've had so many world beaters. And the way they just let them leave, in my opinion, without really any fight at times, is not really that good. I mean, we've got one of the best midfielders in the Bundesliga, the likes of Konrad Laimer, who is massive for this team, by the way. And we're seeing that's one of the reasons why they're not doing so well, because of him, the lack of Laimer. And I didn't feel as though they really put any fight up against Bayern Munich to kind of, get him to stay and things, sign a new contract. But I don't know. And I think with Wolfsburg, it's similar, really. I think they also have a lot of good players going through the books. We've seen Van der Ven, who's been one of the most highly rated defenders in the Premier League this season for Tottenham when he was fit. And, they just let them go through the grass. 1 year, do your apprentice, and you're off to a bigger club, And I just think until they start showing more ambition, really, to keep some of these big stars, then it's going to be hard, because at the end of the day, it takes footballers time to settle into a new league and a new club, a new team. The footballers are humans at the end of the day. They're not machines that can just turn it on, and they play to a certain level every week. And I think, for me, you can criticize Kovac, you can criticize some of the managers they've had in the past, but I just think there's not that much ambition from the club, in my opinion. That's my honest view. And I just think, it's if they really want to start becoming regular top four club, and for Leipzig to become like title winners, they need to start keeping all the players and setting long-term goals. That's my honest opinion for these clubs.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how they both get on in the next few weeks. Certainly looking at Wolfsburg's next few games, away to Bochum, away to Gladbach, home to Freiburg, away to Darmstadt, and then they've got Bayern. So really interesting to see how many points they pick up. Bochum away is a tricky one all the time. Gladbach at home in the Pokal, then Freiburg. So, I mean, they could quite visibly lose those three and they'd be under all sorts of pressure. But anyway, they did win. So fair play to them. Important 3 points for Wolfsburg, which put the pressure on Leipzig. And so our most entertaining game of the weekend was, of course, the game between Borussia Dortmund and Borussia Mönchengladbach. I mean, Gladbach are like the most entertaining team ever from this season. I think they've been our first most entertaining game of our featured four, like most weeks, because they're just involved in so many different high-scoring matches, and it was the case again this weekend, Mark. And they were 2-0 up in an absolute flash. Some nice goals put together by themselves. Obviously, Rocco Reitz, who's quickly becoming my favourite name in the Bundesliga, and he's producing the goods as well. The young man, having a good time with the under-21s with Germany in the international break, and his form's continuing as he was set free by Alisson Player, stormed through, kept Schlotterbeck at bay, and smashed home for 1-0. Obviously, 1-0 then becomes 2-0 when Kone picks up scraps from a corner and gets that goal, and 2-0. And you're quickly thinking that Signal Iduna Park is going to be a really harsh environment and atmosphere. Before we get onto the Dortmund comeback, Mark, I mean, some of the defending for those first two goals, though, for Dortmund was just so poor. Like how open the defense was for Player's pass to Reitz. He's just literally he's obviously running through the defense, but communication, one of the Dortmund defenders is really high up, then Schlotterbeck's further back, obviously, so Reitz is onside. Then Schlotterbeck tries to make a slide tackle. So if he connected with Reitz, he's lucky he didn't, because he would have got presumably given away a penalty and got sent off. So it's probably lucky they didn't do that in the first place. So, and then the second goal was really weak tackles to allow Kone to get his touch out of his feet to then smash it home. Really good, hit and finish. So, I mean, Dortmund, we could still be talking about a Dortmund side, who lost because of some really questionable defending. We'll come on to their positives in a minute, though. So what do you reckon about the defence? It's always something we're going to be talking about with Dortmund, but again, pretty poor start to that, the first 25 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of Gladbach being really good at the beginning and Dortmund being poor, as you say. I mean, this has been a problem for years for me, for Dortmund. Like the through ball, they don't know how to deal with that at all. And I think I've said it a number of times in recent weeks, but I'm becoming like a real kind of critic of Mats Hummels. I really am. I just think he's so far past his best. It's almost ridiculous at times. And I'm still seeing him play games for Germany and stuff. And then you wonder why Germany lose every week. It's just like, I just don't rate him at all anymore. Like literally, I think he makes so many mistakes in a game. It's almost ridiculous at times, And I think I'm faster than him. Literally, you could stick me on the pitch and I would outrun him quite easily. Yeah, and like for a pro athlete, I'm not sure it's that great. Really, I just don't see what it's all about. Really, I just don't see what the hype's about with Hummels. I think knowing a lot of German people, I just feel as though it's like he's a World Cup winner and he was a very good player. Emphasis on the word was, but how he starts week in, week out for Dortmund, I'll never know. Surely they are better than him at centre half, because, and then the second problem is the partnership of him and Schlotterbeck it just doesn't work at all for me. I just don't like it very much. I might sound overcritical here, but I think time after time, teams know that if you put a through ball against them, you're done for, basically. They can't get back. They're clumsy a little bit. They can give the ball away playing out from the back as well. And they have the occasional good day. They do have the occasional good day as a partnership. But in most cases, it just doesn't work. I'm sorry. But it just doesn't work. And I just feel as though that's part of the problem. And that's been a big issue in recent weeks in the Bundesliga. But I'm going to credit Gladbach as well. I actually think Gladbach are on a good path, despite the fact they lost this game. I just think in midfield, they've got some real strong quality. Reitz has been possibly my breakout star of the season so far this year. I think he's been superb. He's going to be a real player. And, Gladbach have got that great youth system. And it looks like they produced another fantastic player. I was really happy to see my boy Kone as well score, from his perspective, a good goal, despite the poor defending. But it was a great strike from his perspective. And he's starting to show a bit more consistency now as well. And I think overall, Gladbach fans seem to like Sioane as well. I think they're being entertained. It's good football. It's attacking football. Defensively, they're pretty poor, in truth. Like, let's be honest. But this is the Bundesliga. You don't always need watertight defense in the Bundesliga. It's all about scoring goals, having fun when you're playing football, and winning games the right way, so to speak. And I think Gladbach is starting to do that. Points wise, it's still not great at the moment, but they're on to something. And I think they could have a real good. They could be the improved team of the Rückrunde for me, and also moving into Christmas. I think things are definitely getting better for them. And to be honest, if Player had managed to stay on side, which he probably should have done, they would have been 3-0 up before Dortmund have even pretty much got a kick. So, they do need to get better with the game management, but we know that Dortmund are capable of doing these kind of comebacks, don't we? And I'm sure Rory will take us through that.
Yeah, certainly on Gladbach, though. Yeah, I agree. They're just maybe that goal scorer short, aren't they, of being that slightly higher upside, kind of messing around with European spots there, I think. But, Player has been in great form. And, the midfield is really interesting, as you say. Reitz, Kone, Weigl, Neuhaus, that's a really strong four at the very least. But yeah, moving on. So obviously Dortmund did get themselves back into it. As you say, Mark, it might have been 3-0. But credit to Marco Reus, who broke up a Gladbach attack to start a Dortmund counter-attack, which led to Brandt chipping to the back post for Sabitzer to start the comeback with a heavily deflected half volley. I think it came off Scally or Nets. I forget which one, to make it 2-1. And then before you know it, a bit of quality a ball from the left-hand side of the pitch, so I presume Ben Spaini, found Bino Gittins, who headed it down for Füllkrug, and his finish was full of quality actually, and we're starting to see him become relied upon, of course, in a Dortmund shirt. A couple more goals for him now, so yeah, go to 2-2. Then you're thinking, right, well, it'd probably be 2-2 by half time, but there was still time. Well, in a bit of a frenzied cycle of play, Dortmund win the ball high up. I think unfortunately was Kone who was dispossessed on near enough the edge of his area, and Bino Gittins gets off a really clean strike into the bottom corner for 3-2. And then, obviously going to half time, you're absolutely buoyed. A fantastic comeback in a short space of time. Absolutely shocked Gladbach and might have just taken a bit of wind out of their sails, I think, for the second half, and maybe a bit of legs as well. So there are the odd opportunity for Gladbach, and they were pushing. I think there was a half chance towards the end of the match for Kramer. I think he sliced his volley just over the bar. And then, the fourth goal, by the time they're pushing everyone up, including the keeper, which obviously leads to the fourth goal for Donny Marlon to sprint all the way through and to, enjoy that little walk in where there was no keeper at home to make it, 4-2, and an important victory for Dortmund to pick up after those 2 losses in the Bundesliga, at least. From a Dortmund perspective, they rarely lose to Gladbach at home. They have an aggregate score of 35-7 in their last 9 home meetings with Gladbach. So take from that what you will. Absolutely. We said it in the prediction show, didn't we? This game is always entertaining, and it produced the goods again. Really entertaining match. So just finally, I guess on Dortmund, Mark, found their scoring boots to a sense. Really good to see the young Englishman, got an assist and then an important goal. Really, hugely involved in this victory. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more of him. What have you picked up from that victory? Good character. It's hard to write off Dortmund in many games as well. We know that they've got that ability to score goals. We haven't seen it as much this season though. Anything in particular you picked out from this, or just then taking the advantage of the fact that Gladbach aren't the best defensively, so they got to get those goals through slightly easier ways, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's partly that, but I also think, that Füllkrug is starting to find his feet as well at the club, which is really important. We've talked about, unfortunately, Haller just seems to have fallen off a cliff with his form completely, and I think I'm happy to see that Füllkrug is scoring goals on a regular basis again now. He had a slow start to his time at Dortmund, but I think that's like 4 in 5 now. And I think he looks like a man that's back amongst the goals. And obviously Germany need that as well, that's for sure. But I think in general, it's just character. One thing you can never, ever accuse Dortmund of doing is giving up. Like, you just don't see that at all. They can be 3-0 down and they still come back and get a result. They do it time after time. Probably even more than Bayern in some ways. They just time after time come down. We saw it just a few weeks ago as well. They came back from 3-1 down against Frankfurt to draw as well. And they do this a lot. Even against Stuttgart the other week, they lost that game. But the fact they only lost it 2-1 is a miracle in many ways, because it should have been 4 or 5. But the thing is, they do stick in games and they get a lot of cheap points from late goals and things when teams don't manage to finish them off. And I think that is the Dortmund way. And it's, to be honest, I think that's one of the big legacies of the Terzic kind of reign so far. I just think he's made them very, very gritty and very hard to beat at times. But I just don't think it's like, as you say, defensively, they can't find a partnership that works at the minute. And I think also that, as you mentioned, they've not got as many goals in them. And I just think in general, they've not got a world-class player. That's the problem at the moment. Every year since we've been covering this show, and for many years in the past, they've always had a world-class player, whether it was Haaland, Bellingham, both. Even Sancho at the time, you could probably say was world-class in his time Dortmund. Obviously, it's not gone on to be like that at United, but nobody could complain about his form at Dortmund. They've always had world-class players, and at the moment they don't have one world-class player in the team. I think, the closest you've got to it is probably Royce, but he's getting on. He's past his prime ultimately now. And again, Hummels is another former world-class player that's like way past his best now. So they probably need a good window. I think this year it's probably just Champions League. Try and get through to the last 8 or so of the Champions League. Try and get top 4. And then they've got to go out there and again show ambition, which I talk about a lot in Bundesliga teams. And as much as I love German football and the Bundesliga, the one thing I'd like to see change is ambition. And I think what I've been talking about for ages has been shown with Leverkusen this year. They showed ambition and you see the result. You know what I mean? They sold Diaby, but he was the only one that left. And they actually strengthened the team as well, which is absolutely brilliant to see for me. And the Bundesliga, we are so lucky to have so many amazing players in this league, really. I guarantee there'll be at least 20 players from this league playing now that are going to all be at top Premier League clubs, top La Liga clubs and things like that in the next 2 or 3 years. But the one thing I'd like to see change is just a bit more ambition. You know what I mean? I think Dortmund are also guilty of that too, not showing enough ambition and being a little bit too focused on the 50+1. I'm a fan of 50+1. I think it's great. I love only paying, 15 euros for a ticket to go and watch great football. But at the end of the day, we live in a results-driven world. You know what I mean? And if we want to see Bayern Munich not win the title, we need more Xabi Alonso's to come out there and say, look, you're not winning my title. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are going to win it ahead of you. And we don't care if you're Bayern Munich, basically. We're going to win it ahead of you. And I think if more clubs show that, then we keep more of these great players in the Bundesliga, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Some good points there, Mark. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly cover the best of the rest, and mainly because the games that involved teams towards the bottom end of the table were, very tight draws. And so there weren't really any particular winners, shall we say, of the relegation race. So obviously we saw Union Berlin stop the rot with their late draw, thanks to Kevin Volland scoring in the 88th minute to get a good draw at home to Augsburg after Demirovic again had scored. Darmstadt got a really creditable 1-1 draw away to Freiburg. Not many people would have had that penned down. I certainly was gambling on a few Freiburg players doing well for my fantasy football assets. Not so many points for Grifo on this occasion. And then the 2 Sunday games, a 0-0 draw between Heidenheim and Bochum, definitely a rare one when Heidenheim were involved. So 0-0 for that. And then Hoffenheim being held to it. Well, Hoffenheim getting away with it and getting a 1-1 draw against Mainz, Mark. And one thing that I definitely wanted to pick out was the return of Johnny Burkhart, who was very emotional, I think, after his return, after a long time. And hopefully he can maybe be a catalyst and a bit of feel-good factor for Mainz to push forward. But any thoughts on any of those games? Who do you think, played the best, played the worst? I guess the loser of the weekend, unfortunately, is Cologne, because every team has just got an extra point above them.
Yeah, I think Union were a lot better in the game. Yeah, I think they probably could have won it quite easily. They had the better of the chances in that one. But Augsburg now are a much harder team to beat under Torup. And, that was a good point for them. Despite the late equaliser, I still feel as though they'll be happy with a point there. I think Mainz as well. I watched quite a bit of that game late on Sunday evening here. They looked a lot better, really. They're starting to really find the form now. I think Richter was really good. Even a Jork looks like he's fighting a lot harder now, which unfortunately wasn't really doing at the end of the Svensson era. I don't know if they fell out or something, but things are looking okay. They don't look like a relegation team to me, Mainz at the moment. I think, I'm a bit worried about Freiburg at the minute. We've talked about a lot of the kind of, our legend, like Bundesliga legends, Svensson, your Baumgarts, your Fischers, and your strikes, but it's not really looking that good for any of them. 2 of them have been fired. Baumgart's bottom of the league, and to be honest, Freiburg are not really pulling up any trees at the minute. They're plodding along, but the football is quite significantly worse than it was the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I'm not going to say he's going to leave or anything, but he looks a little bit dejected at times. So I watched some of his interviews, and he's like kind of sighing and saying, well, it's going to be a hard season and stuff. And he doesn't seem to have that much faith in his squad at the moment, and that's a bit worrying. They didn't really sign anyone, to be honest, in the summer. They did miss Flecken. Flecken was a top keeper, and I think Atabulu has done okay, but he's a young keeper that needs to learn the game. And I hope Freiburg are able to pick up a bit more, but as things stand, they're not bad. They're 9th, slap bang mid-table, but they've not won in a while. Let's be honest, they won the first 2 games, and since then they've only picked up, basically 9 points in 10 games. So they're actually averaging less than a point a game over the last 10 matches. So yeah, it is a little bit worrying. They weren't really very good in this game against Darmstadt, and they're another team that are not really hitting the straps at the minute, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought they were getting back to not nowhere near their best, but I thought, there were slightly more encouraging signs in the last month-ish. They were becoming more Freiburg-like, but yeah, that 1-1 draw certainly holds that momentum. That group of teams from 6th to 9th, so Hoffenheim, Frankfurt, Wolfsburg, Freiburg, it kind of just feels like two of those teams who come 6th or 7th are just going to fall into it by accident and not by being in any kind of form, because they're all stumbling. Hoffenheim made a really impressive start to the season, didn't they? Saw off Stuttgart as well not too long ago, but it feels that they've not dropped off as much, but the 1-1 draw wasn't that impressive. Maybe I expect a bit more from all those 4 teams, but they're up there and they'll be challenging for those European spots, those extra ones. But it will be really interesting to see if any of them can go on any kind of run. They'll be well away, and they'll be more kind of contending for 5th if they can actually get a bit of steady momentum. But alas, I think that's a good place for us to finish for this evening. So yeah, just a little bit of a look ahead to the rest of this week. One thing to note is that the Fantasy Football Show, which regrettably we couldn't record on Friday, is going to be on Wednesday evening this week, just because of scheduling, and we want to make sure that we get a show out there. So it'll be out there nice and early for you all. So it will probably be coming before many of the press conferences come. So you'll have to take some of Runa's advice with a pinch of salt. But nevertheless, that'll be there on Wednesday evening. Mark will be back with Petre on Thursday for some predictions as we look ahead to the weekend. And there is a possibility of a Sunday afternoon watch along. So we shall let you know about that accordingly if we plan to do it. But I'll hand over to you, Mark, to finish up tonight's show.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed what you saw today, then remember to check out at Over the Bar FB and at Over the Bar Extra, as well as Rory's at Village Footy 20. Also, don't forget to keep liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let us know what you think as well about what we're producing. Let us know some advice, some tips, what you want to see as well. Do you want to see an anagram return, maybe hero and zero of the week? Let us know what you think as well. But yeah, as we said, there's a lot coming for you as well the next week or two, because we obviously want to have a big push before the winter break, which I think is on the 17th or the 18th of December. So yeah, big 3 weeks or so ahead, and we'll see you again on Wednesday. See you then, guys. Bye-bye.